Welcome everybody to Parshat Nasso 5781. Uh, oh, that's not supposed to happen. Hold on a second. How do we do that? That's how we do that. Okay. I heard my own voice again. Okay. Some people like that. The Parsha, in a nutshell, is it's a hard nutshell to crack. Parshat Nasso has quite a variety. It starts one sort of 2/3 into the counting of the tribes and the giving of the jobs of the Levium, not tribes, families, three families of Levium. The tribe, the firstborn of the Levium was counted already. The of Kahat were counted already in the beginning of last week's the end of last week's parsha, and then this week's parsha begins with the counting of the other two brothers of Gershon and Merari, and then it starts into all kinds of seemingly random laws. The how now that we have these tribes and they're all gathered around the sanctuary. Now that we have basically everybody is positioned correctly, now we can start talking about how to guarantee is not the right word, more preserve as much as possible the holiness of the camp. So then there's rules about who gets to be close to the camp, the Levium, and then as it goes out furthermore, uh, different people of different kinds of tuma, of different kinds of impurity, can't go into certain camps. There's basically three rings around the sanctuary that basically guarantees or doesn't guarantee again. The right word is preserves as much as possible the holiness of the camp. That's the idea. And then on that subject, keeping the purity of the camp, there's also issues of, well, what happens if somebody stole, and well, we can pay the person back. Or if the person dies, we can pay back the person's heirs and family. But what if the person had no family? In other words, really, we're talking about the case of Gezel Hager, stealing from a convert who didn't have any wife or didn't have any children, certainly then has no Jewish family to then inherit. And so the Torah goes into the rules of what happens to such a person. And then again, more about the concept of preserving purity. It talks about the idea of the sotah, of the wife who seems to be having an affair, and then talks about the nazir, which we'll talk about the connection between the sotah and the nazir. But the nazir is a very interesting sort of law that deals with, again, it's a question, it's a very famous debate amongst the Rambam, the Ramban, and others about whether it was a good thing or at all, and whether it was a mitzvah to become this nazir or whether it was actually frowned upon in some ways. Whatever this nazir is, we'll get to the more details as we dive into the actual psukim. And then after that, it talks about Birkat Kohanim, and again the idea of Birkat Kohanim as we feel, hopefully, on Yom Tov when we receive the Birkat Kohanim. The idea is to sort of stamp Hashem's holiness onto our endeavors, right? Hashem is looking out for us. Isa Hashem panav ilecha, Hashem's face, whatever that means, right, is towards us. He cares about us. He cares about our success and our shalom. And right after that, Naso concludes with a very, very long list of the gifts of the princes of each tribe. They're the exact same gifts, but it still goes into detail with each one. The Midrash beautifully shows the different kavanot, the different intents that each prince had, that had more to do with the personality of each tribe. and it's very beautiful and a very long piece of midrash, and worthy of study. And my Rosh Yeshiva would often say that it's not a coincidence that the parsha right after Shavuot, we really are supposed to uh, accept upon ourselves the greatness, the beauty of Torah, especially Torah Shabbal Peh, of the oral tradition. That's when you have a parsha like Naso, which is so long and has so much oral Torah on it. You would think there's nothing much to say about the different gifts of the tribes, especially since they're all literally same things. But the oral law shows you the beauty of Torah in when you get into the details. With that, we're going to jump right into the deep dive here. We're going to look at the Parsha sheet that I had sent out earlier today. And we're going to try to skip around a little bit to get a sort of a flavor of this beautiful oral Torah commentary on this Parsha in the different areas that we see it. If you could hold off on questions till the end, that would be great. I'm all for questions, you know that. But let's try to hold off till then. If we need to write them down, that's great. So we're going to skip the whole counting of the other 2/3 of the families of the Levium and go right into Gezel Hager. So it's a very interesting pasuk that talks about it. It's amongst the other things. Chapter 5, verse 7, it says, "Vitvadu et chatatam asher asu." He's going to confess the sins that he did. Veheshiv et ashamo. He's going to bring he's going to bring an asham. Usually that's a sacrifice. In this case, the asham is the repayment of what he stole. Barosho v'chamishito. He's supposed to bring it, as its principle. And the fifth, as is normal for somebody who stole something and confesses the thievery, they have to bring back not only the principle of what they stole, but they also have to bring back 1/5 of the value. Yosef Alav, in addition to the actual principle. Natan Asher Asham Lo. He has to give it to the person whom he had wronged. It's interesting that of all the sins, and there are many sins that are mentioned in the Torah, as you know, this is the only one where it seems to mention vitvadu, that he has to make vidu, that he has to make a confession. And so the question asked by the Sfat Emet, and he brings an answer in the name of his father, the Chidushei Harim, we're going to see later on in the flesh, as it were, in his actual words, commenting on another verse. But the Sfat Emet asks the question here: why do we have to have a vidu here of all the places in the entire Torah? And the answer, he says, is beautiful. He says, Mori v'Rabbi, my father, my teacher, Zecher Levracha Amar al ma shekatuv mitzvot tshuva itvadu b'gzela. The tshuva and gzela and tshuva and vidui, asking for forgiveness and confessing your sin, specifically seems to be attached to the sin of thievery, of stealing, gzela. Why? Kikol avira bichlal gezel. Because every single sin, when it comes down to it, boils down to its bare minimum. Every single sin is actually thievery. Why? Shemi shemechazir kol advarim leHashem yitbarach shehu mechayev l'chol shehu ba'alim shel kol hanivrayim u'mi sheyadua ze eno chote bevada. So when it comes down to it, every sin is really a sin of thievery. Why? Because what happens when somebody sins? What are you doing when you sin? You are taking the things God gave you and you're misusing them. You're given talents, you're given legs, and yet you run to do something bad. You're given hands, and yet you use those hands instead of doing mitzvot, instead of using those hands to give chesed. You're using those hands to hurt somebody. or worse, if there is such a thing as worse. That's the idea. You're misusing you've been given. You're using them for the wrong thing, and that in and of itself is the essence of sin. Stealing is the essence of sin. Interesting that, as some of you know, I used to teach literature, I used to teach English. One of the books I would teach, not my favorite of his books, maybe my second favorite of his books, there was an author, American, Afghani American writer by the name of Khaled Hosseini, who wrote the book The Kite Runner. So in The Kite Runner, there's a famous incident where the father teaches his son, who's the narrator. The quote goes like this: theft is the one unforgivable sin, the one common denominator of all sins. When you kill a man, you steal a life. You steal his wife's right to a husband, rob his children of a father. When you tell a lie, you steal someone's right to the truth. Stealing, again, this is a very important idea that seems to have traversed into other cultures as well. The truth is, kol avera bichlal gezel. Thievery, theft is literally the common denominator of all sins, as Khaled Hosseini said, and as the Sfat Emet says in the name of his father. So we have this very beautiful idea. That's why vidui, of all things, why the one sin that requires confession, or seems to require confession, is this sin of gezel, of thievery. All right, so that's one way to start. Anyway, if we're going to be going in order, we'll skip to the next. We'll skip a few psukim to the next comment here, and now we're talking about the sotah. Now, the sotah is a very, very misunderstood concept. Basically, as Rav Hirsch points out, a man and his a husband and wife can divorce for any number of reasons. If she's been unfaithful, or if the husband has an inkling that she's been unfaithful, he can divorce her. He can end the marriage. It doesn't need to be any process, I mean, obviously he still has to pay the ketubah. There's rules of gittin. There's still a get to write. There's still he has financial responsibility to her, etc. If there's proof that she has been unfaithful, he doesn't need to go through such a weird rigmarole, a whole process of the sotah where she has to go to Yerushalayim. She's asked if she's had an affair. She has to tell the truth. She has to drink this water. She has to be uncovered. She has to go through walk around with a coin and bring a korban and everything else. All of this is completely unnecessary if all he wants to do is get rid of her. It's only necessary if he doesn't want to get rid of her. He loves her. He wants to know the truth. He wants to know if she's been unfaithful or not with this man with whom he has actually warned her about already. There's been a conversation. There's been a process that's been ongoing. Witnesses have seen her alone with this man whom he has asked her, again, with witnesses, not to be alone with. The only question that remains is if she's actually been unfaithful to him. So part of the process, part of this very strange, miraculous, really, process, and actually the fact that there's miracle involved in this legal dilemma points to one of the reasons why it's in the Parsha. Because we've been, as Rav Hirsch points out, as we've mentioned before, the whole Parsha is about guaranteeing this, or not guaranteeing, again, I keep saying guaranteeing. It's not guaranteeing, it's attempting to keep sanctity in the camp. Sanctity is spiritual, but it's kept in a physical way. You have to do physical things to keep the sanctity in the camp. You have to, for example, be sexually pure. You can't just, hop into bed with just anybody. If you're married, especially, you have to stay with your spouse. So that sort of purity is demanded of a camp that is going to be pure. So the pasuk tells us, "Lakacha kohen mayim kedoshim." He's supposed to bring holy water. Let's say mikvah, pure mikvah water. B'chli cheres, it has to be in an earthenware vessel. The minha afar, and he's supposed to put into it dirt. Asher yeh b'karka mishkan. That's on the floor of the mishkan, the floor of the tabernacle. B'kacha kohen v'natan el hamayim. He's supposed to put that dirt, that earth, into the water, and he's basically making from this earth, from this dust, he's making this water concoction that she's going to drink. So the Gemara and the Midrash, the Gemara in Sotah 98 mentions sorry, it's cool. Maybe it's the Gemara in Chulin. Not sure right now. I have different sources saying different things. It happens. Either way, it's on page 98. But on page 98 of some Masech, either Chulin or Sotah, it has the incident where Avraham said, "Anochi afar ve'efer," I am dust and ash. And in the merit of his humility in saying, "I am dust and ash," we are zoche, his descendants are zoche, le'afar sotah ve'afar para, ve'efer para, right? With the dust of the sotah, in other words, this dusty water that we're talking about, and the afer, the ash of the para aduma, the red heifer that was burnt down into ash, and that was used to purify the Jewish people. What's the connection here? What's going on? Says the Beit Halevi, and I emphasize that the Beit Halevi wrote his commentary only on Bereshit and Shemot, but as I've said before, and as I will say, I'll say it again, his commentary is going to cross-reference other psukim, as is in this case, where in Bereshit, his commentary, where Avraham actually said, "Anochi afar ve'efer." So his comment is there, but we're going to learn about it here, where the reward is. So, what does dust and ash have to do with these two mitzvot? We're going to focus on the dust, obviously. So, what is dust? How is it different than ash? So, dust, says the Beit Halevi, is symbolic of the worthless past. Right? What is it? It has no inherent value. Its importance lies in the potential it holds as fertile soil. In other words, it has potential in the future. Right now, it's nothing. Ashes, on the other hand, in their present condition, they're absolutely worthless. Their value is from the past, right? They don't provide any nourishment. Ash is no good for plants. They can't be made into pottery. They're worthless. By comparing himself to both these things, dust and ash, what was Avraham implying? That like earth, he's amounted to nothing in the past, and like ash, he has no potential in the future. That's how humble he was. I was nothing in the past. At this point where I'm standing right now, I have accomplished nothing great. This is how humble he was. Of course, he had accomplished quite a bit. It brought monotheism to the world. So we don't. He was not just being facetious. He couldn't have seen how great his accomplishments were.
What?
A question?
No.
Okay, just checking. So he didn't see how great his accomplishments were. He was quite humble, but as a reward for saying I am just dust, which is alluding to his worthless past, theoretically, he was granted the mitzvah of the dust of the sotah, which has the power to prove that the past was good. In other words, the past of this woman, in the past, when she was alone with this guy who she should not have been alone with, granted, avada, she should not have been alone with this guy, but at least she didn't mess up. At least she stood strong in her morals and didn't actually have relations with this guy, and therefore this dust proves it. This dust of the past proves the righteousness of this woman in the past, and that's the symbolism. That's why it's dust that she has to put in this water. Whereas the ashes, what are the ashes? The ashes of the para aduma have the potential to purify a person into the future. A person from that point on is now pure, does not have too much meat, and can now eat the korban pesach and other korbanot. And that's the idea of the ashes. So again, we're focusing really on the dust here. So when Avraham said, "I'm dust and ashes," it's not just poetic. This had meaning to him. It has meaning to us. He was saying, I had no potential in the past. I have not done anything towards the future. So in the merit of his humility about the past and the future, his descendants have the ability to clean up the past with the dust of the sotah and to clean up the future with the ashes of the para aduma. That's how the Beit Halevi explains this Gemara and this Midrash. All right, we're going to skip to the nazir. Again, this is not all exhausting. We could spend literally, we could probably spend an entire class on this pasuk alone, on this concept alone for sure, easily. What the nazir is, what the nazir symbolizes, everything else. We're not going to do that tonight. We want to have sort of a broad overview of the parsha, and then some details about certain psukim. But we're going to look at a Rashi on the concept of nazir. And specifically, we're going to ask the question, why is a nazir follow after sotah in the Torah? In fact, it's interesting also, by the way, for those of you who plan on learning Daf Yomi, there is a Masechta Sotah, there's a Masechta Nazir, and they also follow each other in the reverse order of how they go in the Torah, by the way, interestingly enough. Not going to go into that now. Right? In the Torah, first we learn about the Sotah, then we learn about the Nazir. In the Gemara, it goes Nazir first and Sotah next, I'm pretty sure, unless I'm mistaken. It wouldn't be the first time. I'm pretty sure about that. I'll look it up later to double check. But either way, they're definitely back to back. And the reason for that, says Rashi, is going to be what he says here. Israel, Hashem tells Moshe, speak to the Jewish people, and tell them, Ish o isha ki yaflin lindor neder nazir lahazir Hashem. If man or woman decides to become a nazir, they have to set themselves apart for Hashem. So a nazir, in brief, is a person, man or woman, who promises for at least 30 days that they're going to grow their hair, not going to take any haircuts, and they're not going to have anything to do with grape products. Not vinegar, not grapes, not wine, not raisins, nothing. And part of the reason for that, we'll see, has something to do with wine and what wine symbolizes, but we'll get to that in the next pasuk. Meanwhile, though, Rashi wants to know why, as I said before, does Nazir follow Sotah? What do the two have in common with each other? Ordinarily, it doesn't seem to have anything to do with each other. Nazir doesn't. By the way, Nazir also can't go to funerals, not even to family members. Even more strict than the Kohen Gadol, the laws of a Nazir. One of the reasons why, as I mentioned, as I sort of hinted to before, there are Rishonim who say that it's not advisable at all to ever become a nazir. With some exceptions, of course, there are Rishonim, of course, who say that it is one of the mitzvot to be a nazir if you can. Nowadays, by the way, we can't. It is highly unadvisable to be a nazir nowadays. Why? Anybody know? You can unmute if you know. Aside from the fact that we're not living in Eretz Yisrael, even if we lived in Eretz Yisrael, it would not be advisable, because at the end of your Nazirut, you need to bring a korban, you need to bring a sacrifice. And you cannot bring a korban today. No way. Not without a Beit HaMikdash, which unfortunately has not been rebuilt yet. And when it is rebuilt, then by all means, you can be a Nazir, but we'll see what Mashiach has to say about whether it's advisable or not. All right, anyway, so.
Please God.
Please God. Yes. So says Rashi, Ki Yafli. When you make this pella, when you make this pronouncement, or actually mafli could also mean from the word pella, which means a wonder, an amazing thing. I think that's how the Ibn Ezra and I think the Ramban also translates it. It's unhuman. It's unnatural, let's put it that way, to become a nazir, to abstain from these things. So says Rashi, Lama nismecha parshat nazir le parshat sotah. Why is the parsha of nazir, why does it follow sotah? Nismach from the word samech, which means next to, or actually also means lean on. Right? That's where the word simicha comes from. You lean on the person who got smicha was the rabbi giving the smicha would lean upon the person's head. That's an ancient smicha. Also, when you bring a korban, you're supposed to lean on the head of the korban that you're bringing. The question of whether women had to do that or not, not going to go there now. But anyway, Lomar lacha shekol haroa sotah bikil kula. This teaches you that anybody who saw the sotah in her disgrace, yazir atzmo min hayayin, should abstain from wine. Shu mevi lidei niuf, because wine leads to adultery. It leads to lightheadedness, of course. Leads to bad behavior. There's there are a lot of country songs about that, obviously, right? One beer, one drink can lead to all kinds of other bad behaviors, right? It's if you want to be clear-headed, you want to make sure you don't do any big mistakes. The office holiday party is a very common excuse for bad behavior, right? The drunkenness, drugs, those sorts of things that muddle up the mind, those usually have a tendency to lead people to bad behavior. That's not a chidush. That shouldn't surprise anybody. I imagine, I don't see your faces right now, but I imagine nobody's saying, what? Really? That can happen? Yes, that apparently is nothing new. That can happen. Even Rashi knew about that. And Rashi's quoting from the Gemara in Sotah. So the first page, literally the first page of the Gemara Sotah, makes it very clear. That's why a person, if they see somebody doing this terrible thing, they don't see the sotah engaged in bad behavior. They see the sotah in her disgrace, and yet they should abstain from wine. So you might think the Bali Musar write quite a lot about this, and maybe we'll talk about this more in future years. But it's worth mentioning, and I'm sure Rabbi Hollander's talked about this before. It's very strange. Because, as I just said, the sotah, the nazir who became a nazir, didn't see the sotah engaged in bad behavior. He or she saw the sotah punished. She's embarrassed. She's bikilkula. She's ashamed. She's disgraced. Why would somebody like that even think to copy her behavior? And the answer is because seeing this brings the potential for this into one's mind. when such a thing isn't even in your mind, it isn't even a possibility. So you won't ever do it. The Jews at Har Sinai that we celebrated, a few days ago, right? The Jews at Har Sinai, when they said, "Lo tigdov, thou shalt not steal," do you think it occurred to any of them at that moment that maybe it was a good idea to steal? They heard Hashem's voice giving some of the 10 commandments. They heard Moshe Rabbeinu saying, "Do not steal." There was thunder and lightning. Of course they weren't thinking about stealing. The next day that they had to be worried about it. It's the next day when they started planning the golden calf. That's when they needed to worry about it. When you're seeing the sotah and her disgrace, you're not interested in her, whatever behavior she did. But somewhere deep down in the recesses of your subconscious, something, a light fixture flickers on, and the potential for that behavior becomes a reality. It becomes a reality. It didn't occur to you before. Wait a minute, somebody did it. Oh, she's being embarrassed. That you push aside and you think, she did something interesting. Maybe, we're not interested now. But a few days later, maybe, and you begin to entertain the idea, and then that entertained idea, as awful as it was a few days ago, a few days later is going to already inhabit a nice sized apartment in your mind, and now now it's going to be a Yetzer Hara that you're going to have to fight. To avoid that, Chazal, or the Torah, actually, the way Chazal explain it, the Torah set up a system in which you can fight that Yetzer Hara before it even becomes anything major. Fight the Yetzer Hara while it's still just a tiny string, and before it becomes something quite unraveled and impossible to handle. So that's why the nazir follows the sotah. But on a deeper level, let's look at the next pasuk. Next pasuk says, chapter 6, verse 3. Miyayin v'shecher yazir chometz yayin v'chometz shecher lo yishte v'chol mishrat anavim lo yishte v'anavim malachim v'veshim lo yochel. He has to abstain from wine, anything that's any kind of heavy drink. He or she, by the way, a woman can also become a nazir. Not even drink vinegar or wine or anything else that has to do with grapes. No grapes, no fresh grapes, no dried grapes. That's right, even raisins. Why not? So for that, we're going to look at the commentary of Rav Shimon Schwab. Rav Shimon Schwab, rabbi of the German community, of the Yekka community in Washington Heights for many years, the author of Mayam Beit HaShoeva. He writes, and here's the text here. He brings, of course, this Chazal we brought from Rashi, that the Parsha of Nazir follows the Parsha of Sotah because of this idea. And he says it's interesting. He says, why is a person who sees a sotah in her disgrace encouraged to become a nazir? Right? It should be the other way around. Somebody who didn't see her, you might think somebody who didn't see her should become a nazir. Somebody who didn't know that this kind of thing can, what this can lead to, maybe that person should be a nazir. Furthermore, he brings from the Zohar, from the Holy Zohar, I'm trying to find it here. Right, he brings the Rashi. Good. Where's this? So he brings from the Zohar HaKadosh on the pasuk Meyayin v'Sheichel Yazir, the previous pasuk. It asks there, Lama b'kohanim inam asurim ki im yayin v'sheichar. Why is so why is a nazir forbidden to drink wine and also forbidden to eat grapes? Or a Kohen who is forbidden to drink wine is not forbidden from eating grapes. 1 second, let me just get some more air in here. Just a moment. Sorry.
Would that be like related to our own sons?
Yes,
the two sons?
exactly. So exactly after they died, the very first law that's given is that the Kohen is not allowed to drink wine before the avoda. But it doesn't say anywhere there that they can't eat grapes. So it seems like a nazir has this extra level of siyag, of a fence around the mitzvah. They can't even eat grapes. They can't do anything to do with grapes. So the Zohar HaKadosh wants to know why, and it gives an answer. The Zohar gives an answer to its own question, and it mitarates uvda da mila da raza ilah. It's a huge secret. So this is a secret of the Torah, a Kabbalistic secret. And he's going to quote now. Vaha yidiyahu ilna chav be adam kadma anavim havu ayin sham. Says the reason is because the fruit that Adam ate from in the garden that caused a lot of the trouble that we have in the world, that fruit was grape, anavim. So the Zohar, this is the tree in the garden was a grapevine. This is the opinion you probably might have heard before. There are differences of opinion about what the fruit was that Adam and Chava ate from which they ate. Sorry, my grammar is not so great right now. But this is the famous opinion of the Zohar that it was indeed grapes. Rav Schwab is going to now endeavor to try to explain what is going on here, because if let me break this down for you. If the problem with grapes is that Adam Harishon ate it, that was the fruit that he sinned with, so you shouldn't eat grapes either. Not raisins, not grapes, not grape juice, not wine. It has nothing to do with the nazir in and of itself. If the sin of Adam Harishon is the problem, so it's a problem for all of us. Nazir, Kohen, Levi, Yisrael, Ger, it doesn't matter. Jew, non-Jew, nobody should be eating from grapes if that's the problem. So what's going on here? Good question. That's Rav Schwab. What the Nazir is doing by taking on Nazirut, by becoming a Nazir, what the main act of the Nazir is to undo, to fix, to mitaken what Adam Harishon did. That's the mission. When you want to become a Nazir, what you're really doing is you are fixing what Adam did wrong. And if that's your goal, then you can't do what Adam did. Adam ate from grapes. You can't eat grapes. That's exactly the point. What does that mean? How are you fixing what Adam did? First, you have to know what the sotah did that was so wrong. You know what she did? What was her mistake? Here, the sotah of halcha achar tavot. The fact that sotah went after her tava, after her lust, after her desire, the tavat liba, and she went after her yetzer. What did she do? She took away the tzelem elokim shalah, She took away her godly image. What gives us our tzelem elokut? What gives us our godliness is our ability to say no. In other words, every single animal, every single creature on the planet can do what it wants to do, given the opportunity. Not everything can say no to something it wants to do, unless there's another incentive, right? Right? A dog will eat its food unless there's something else going on, unless there's a better food, or unless the master is going to reward the dog with something if it doesn't eat the food, right? He's going to reward the dog with okay, go ahead and eat it, or or a thank you, or a better treat, or a trip somewhere, or whatever. The like we said before in the Ibn Ezra's translation of Pele, Yafli Neder, the idea is that this is something amazing, that a human being can do something so unnatural. We often praise the human being for being able to do unnatural things. For example, just quick example, we say in the bracha of Asher Yatzar, after we go to the bathroom, we say umafli la'asot, that Hashem made a pella when he made the human being. What's the pella? All creatures go to the bathroom, literally. What's so amazing about the human being? What's amazing about the human being is that we're a mixture of a body and a soul, and we have some sort of spirituality. We're a pella like that. The sotah, by doing this, by following after her desires and not listening to her self-control, by not controlling herself, she deleted that. She said, you know what? I'm not going to be so godly. So the nazir has to undo that and focus on the godliness. And how do you focus on the godliness? By doing exactly what the human being could not do from the beginning of creation, and that's control him or herself. And by eating from the fruit, and eating from the grape, Adam messed up. And to undo that, the nazir doesn't eat grape. So it's all connected. It's all one beautiful idea of what a human being can be. A human being can be Tzelem Elokim. The Gadlut Ha'adam is what he's focusing on here. V'yazir atzmo min hayayin, he concludes, Yazir atzmo min hayayin min ha'anavim, she'et she'achal mimenu adam harishon kefen haya, k'divei hazor hakadosh. By the way, he also references here also the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Daf, page 90a. If you 90, that's it's Ayin Aleph. So over there, the Gemara also basically says, amongst the different opinions of what that fruit was, it also gives the opinion that it was indeed a grapevine. Okay. Time is 8 o'clock. We have approximately 15 minutes. And there's a few more insights that I saw that I'd like to share. God willing, 3 more ideas. We give it about 5 minutes each. We'll be able to handle it. We can do this. All right. We're going to skip a few psukim. Literally 8 psukim. I'm sorry?
Like Bob the Builder?
Yes, like Bob the Builder. Yes, we can. All right. Bamidbar, chapter 6, verse 11, Vav Yud Aleph. It says, this is in regards again to the nazir. He gives a korban. He gives a korban. One of the korbanot is a chatat, a sin offering. Why he gives a sin offering is a famous debate between Rashi and Ramban and others. Maybe we'll get to that maybe next year. But for now, or maybe we'll get into it now. Yeah, never mind. We'll get into it now. We have the comment of the Chatam Sofer. Asa Kohen Echad Chatas Echad Leola v'chiper alav me'asher chata al nefesh v'kidash et rosho b'yom hahu. He takes these two animals that the korban that the nazir gives him on this day that he's going to not be a nazir anymore. And he brings one as a sin offering, one as a burnt offering, and he then gives he basically gets forgiveness for the nazir for his sin on that day. I'm sorry, I take this back. I'm saying this wrong. This particular chatat is not for being a nazir. This chatat seems to be because he this is right. Okay, I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself here. So Yud Aleph is talking about this particular pasuk is talking about if the nazir became impure through a dead body, through no fault of his own, he still has to restart, has to reset the entire nazirut. So if it was a 30-day nazirut and he was 29 days into it, he was going to finish his nazirut the next day, and he stumbled upon a dead body, he has to give a korban, a chatat, sin offering, and start his nazirut all over again. And then he has to start his nazirut, like I said, all over again from that day on, another 30 days if that was going to be a 30-day one. It was a 3-year nazirut. He promised to be a nazir for 3 years, and he was 3 years and 364 days. He has to start all over again from day one. Reset, remix, as they say. All right, so Rashi says, "Masher chata al nefesh." He has to then give a korban for his sin. Shlo nizhar metumat meit. He wasn't supposed to be. He wasn't as careful as he could have been about tumat meit. Rabbi Elazar hakafar omer. Then there's another opinion of Rabbi Elazar hakafar. He says mitzir atzmo min hayayin, because he pained himself from wine. That phrase, tzir atzmo min hayayin, he pained himself from wine, is a very strange explanation. And so the Chatam Sofer wants to give us a reason for why, to explain this. What's the pain that he's causing himself by not drinking wine? That's how we usually understand it. He has caused himself pain by not drinking wine. And for that, he deserves to bring a sin offering. The Chatam Sofer here quotes the Gemara in the Darim that Rashi is quoting, Amru Nazir Tame Chana Bitzaro Min Hayayin. Why? Al Shenatama Mihayayin Harishonim Yiplu. He was not careful, and then he abstained from wine. Says the Chatam Sofer. Usually, abstaining from wine should be the exact opposite. We know ki tzaddik ochel v'sova nafsho. We know that a tzaddik becomes a tzaddik by sort of neglecting the physical urges, right? By abstaining from things. So what's the problem? The problem is not in abstaining from things, says the Chatam Sofer. The reason to bring a sin offering is not because he's abstaining, it's because he's suffering. Because a person is free at every moment of his or her life to abstain from things without any kind of vow. And that's what makes you a tzaddik. When you're putting a vow into it, when you're causing yourself pain, that just shows how attached you are to physicality. How your Yetzer Hara is paining you. If you're at a meal and somebody puts in front of you a plate with a dessert, and you've put yourself on a diet, and you want to be healthy, and you don't need the dessert. Let's say it's not Lekavod Shabbat, Lekavod Yom Tov, Lekavod Wednesday, or whatever. You realize it's literally, as the Kutzker said, Lekavod Boch, in honor of your stomach, right? So you're going to abstain from that piece of cake because of you're being strong about yourself. You're not causing yourself pain. So that's a beautiful thing. If you're abstaining from it because you promised yourself you weren't going to have cake, and you really want to, and it's hurting you to do it, that's not such tzidkut, says the Chatam Sofer. That's not really such righteousness. You're just being honest to yourself, which is good. Don't get me wrong. It's not easy to keep a vow. We know that because a lot of us take on all kinds of vows Rosh Hashanah time, and I don't want to remind you of them right now because it's quite a few months after Rosh Hashanah. After all, the next Yom Tov is Rosh Hashanah, right? So I don't want to remind you about the vows you took on last Rosh Hashanah, but let's be honest, most of us aren't keeping them very well. If you're putting a vow onto yourself, you need that kind of policing. So that's not the same kind of righteousness. So that's why that's how the Chatam Sofer explains this language of Rashi. That the sin isn't Tzu'ar atzmo min hayam. It's not because you're keeping yourself from wine that you're getting this mitzvah of nazir, assuming it's a mitzvah. It's Tzu'ar atzmo. You're paining yourself. That's the chatat. That's the reason you need to bring a chatat, because you're paining yourself. The pain is not good. You're punishing yourself. That's not good. The righteousness comes from abstaining and being happy about it. Being proud of yourself. You've elevated yourself. And that's the idea. A few psukim later, it says, "V'zo Torah nazir biyom milot yimei nizro yavi oto al petach o al moed." This is the ritual. This is the Torah of the nazir, and on the day that he becomes completely free of being a nazir, he's finished his nazirut. What does he do? He says, "Yavi oto." He brings himself al petach o al moed, to the entrance of the house, to the entrance of the ohel moed, of the tent of meeting. Very strange, though. The extra word, says the Meshech Chachma, very weird that it says Nizro Yavi Oto. He brings Oto, he brings himself. The word Oto is completely, seemingly unnecessary. The full verse without it would still make sense. He would have said Yavi El Petach O Moed, that he brings this thing to the whatever his ritual, his sacrifice is. The Moed doesn't need to say Oto, like he brings himself. So why does it say himself? Says the Meshech Chachma very beautifully, but we're going to try to speed things up a bit. Meshech Chachma says he brings literally himself, his new self. He's not bringing the same old self, says the Meshech Chachma. The whole point of the Nazirut was to make a new self out of this person, a new him, a new her. That is what he's bringing to the Ohel Moed. He's bringing that new being, that new creation that he or she created by taking on Nazirut. That's what he's bringing. That's what she's bringing to the Ohel Moed. It's a new person, newborn, reborn. Right? Kamosha Amru Nazir Chotei, is as if the Nazir sinned. So maybe Atzmo, he's bringing himself. Maybe Ish Acher, as if he's bringing another person. This is a new person that's been created, and that's the tzidkut. That's the greatness of the Nazir. You can read the whole source on your own. It's in the source sheet that I sent out. But I briefly want to get into this Kiddushei Arim that I alluded to earlier. We started with the Sfat Emet, and now we're going to conclude with his father, the Kiddushei Arim. First, we're going to look at a Rashi. First, we're going to look at a pasuk. Let's skip to it. So, as I said before, the parsha ends with the gifts of the princes, and we would be remiss if we didn't at least talk at least a little bit about them. And these are all the same gift. The ikriv karbano, karet kesef achash, shloshim u'meya mishkala, mizrak echad kesef shivim shekel b'shekel hakodesh, shneim melayim solat b'lulav Hashem mincha. Same korban, same gift was given by each and every single member of every single prince of each tribe. Same exact gift. Rashi, interestingly, and by the way, the gift was 1 silver bowl, that's 130 shekels, 1 silver basin, that's 70 shekels. They have flour and oil mixed in, there's a meal offering. Rashi does a strange thing. He doesn't comment on any of these gifts except for one, on the second one. Netanel ben Tzu'ar, the second one. He says, why is it why the gematria is 800, 930 keneged shnotav shel Adam Barishon. That's how old Adam Barishon was when he died. And he says shloshim u'mea mishkala. This is because we'll just look at the English real quick because we're running out of time. Right, the numerical values of these words karat kesef are 930, which is the age of Adam Arishon. The weight is 130 shekels, alludes to the fact that Adam Arishon raised children to maintain the world in existence. He was 130 years old. He lived 130 years old before he begot a son named Seth, Shet, right? Mizrak Echad Kesef. That's the numerical value is 520. That's an allusion to Noach, who had children when he was 500 years old, and then before the decree of the flood that happened when he was 520, etc., etc. So it goes in. Rashi explains every single piece right there. The Chiddushei Arim wants to know, why does Rashi focus on this poor guy, this one Nasi? You read the Rashis, he has absolutely nothing to say about any of the other sacrifices. All of a sudden, here we go. We're gonna talk all about this particular tribe, Netanel ben Tzu'ar. And he quotes, by the way, from Rabbi Moshe Hadarshan, which is one of his teachers. And so that's Rashi. It says the Chiddushei Arim. You know why he's focusing on Netanel ben Tzu'ar? Why him? Why not the first? Why not Nachshon ben Aminadav, the first one? The answer is very beautiful. And it's worth going a little over time, but we're going to try not to. It's because the second one looks like the first one. The second one needs to be flushed out. We need to have a reason for why it's not just copy and paste. Netanel ben Tzu'ar didn't just copy and paste what Nachshon ben Aminadav did. He had his own kavanot, and these are his kavanot. Why this amount? Why 920? Why 520? Why 130? Why this? Why that? It's all these different kavanot of Netanel ben Tzu'ar. He put his effort into it. He gave the karbanot that meant something to him. These gifts, these different gifts, are all the things that he felt would have this meaning. B'midrash noten tam chol nasi v'nasi, as I said before, says the Chiddushei Arim. The midrash goes into the korbanot, the kavanot of all the Nesiim, of all the gifts that they gave. And for that reason, Rashi wants to focus on this one to show you that all of them had kavanot. You want to find out what they all were? Go look in the midrash. Meanwhile, Rashi wants you to know that Netanel ben Tzu'ar was not a copycat. It was not just something that he just wanted to duplicate from the previous Nasi. He wanted to bring something from himself, and these were the kavanot of Netanel ben Tzu'ar, and that's why we have this beautiful explanation of Rashi on exactly the second Nasi. At this point, I would like to, if my computer is functioning, I don't know what's happening here.
Seems like it's working.
Oh yeah, you see me?
Oh,
Okay.
maybe you just paused at that
It's all
second.
mixed up here. So I'm gonna stop the recording and stop the live feed to Facebook, if I can, and see if there's any questions. All right.
I know that we were talking a bit about. Oh, hello.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, so I know that we were talking a little bit about like smicha and I don't know. I was like over Shavuos, we were learning that like smicha can only really be like fully given in Israel. Have you heard of that?
Yes. The ancient smicha, not current smicha. The smicha that we have nowadays is not the same as it used to be. To get smicha back then, I actually mentioned this as well on Shavuot, interestingly enough, during one of my classes. I forget which one now, but
No.
we also mentioned how smicha used to be. You had to memorize things. There was oil and leaning involved. And yes, it was only given properly in Eretz Yisrael. Oh, I remember now. It was when we talked about Shmuel. Oh yeah. That was the first night when we talked about how Shmuel's eruv was not accepted by Rabbi Elazar. Okay. Anyway, Shmuel didn't have smicha. That's why Shmuel is not called Rabbi Shmuel. It's just Shmuel. That was the context. But suffice it to say, yes, you are correct. Real quick though, speaking of rabbis, you may or may not know. I hope you know that every week I record a video for the shul on the parsha. Lately, as of last week, in fact, National Council of Young Israel is featuring the rabbis of the shuls and their videos on the parsha. It's called 4 Minutes of Torah, and you can sign up to receive these every week. I think I sent out a WhatsApp or something about that, or the email last week. This week, I am honored to be the featured rabbi. So, if you get a chance, yeah, it's pretty exciting. So my little Parsha video on Naso is going to be seen by potentially 20,000 other congregants of Young Israel shuls around the world. So, God willing, I say something smart. Something worth something worth listening to. And also, while we're on the subject of my weekly videos, we're coming up, we're not there yet, but by Parshat Vayetchanan, very soon, we are going to be at the 1-year anniversary of when I started making these Parsha videos. And at that time, I'm going to have a 25 question quiz that I'll make available to people. And if you get the highest score on that quiz, you will get a $25 gift certificate. So the quiz will maybe force you to rewatch those videos, or at least re-listen to them if watching them is very painful. So that's going to be the incentive to take the quiz and do well and get a prize. First person to get all 25 questions right gets the prize. And then if nobody gets all 25 right, then the highest points gets it. Anyway, that's the announcements for tonight. Tomorrow morning, shul 6:05. And I wish everybody a good night, unless there's any more questions, comments, requests, dedications.
Could I actually
ask you, Rabbi Eddie? Real proud of you.
That's very exciting.
Yes, it is.
Could I ask you a potential kashrus question after?
Yeah, after?
Should I just call you now after this video?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, thank you.
I hope I know the answer. Okay.
Yeah.
Good night.
Okay. Well,
Take
thank you.
Kaya.
To you. Take care. Good night,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Hi. Give me a second.
I'm so sorry. I'm